Welcome back, and moving on with tonight's program, the Business and Intellectual Property Authority, in collaboration with the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, is hosting an international roundtable consultative forum on the corporate business law reform. The week-long forum aims to bring together experts in company law, corporate governance and tax law to craft aspects of Namibia's new business law. To give us more detail on this, I'm joined by the Executive Marketing and Corporate Communication at BIPA, Ockert Jansen. Ockert, good evening and welcome to the Daily Round. Good evening and welcome to the Daily.
Good evening, Lina. Thank you for having me.
Ockert, what is the rationale behind BIPA hosting the International Roundtable Consultative Forum?
So it's important to contextualize what we are doing, Nina. BIPA is the regulator and administrator of laws related to business and intellectual property. Now, the current laws regulating business are twofold. It's the Companies Act of 2004, as well as the Close Corporations Act of 1988. But we know that these laws are quite dated, and they are currently non-responsive to business and economic growth and development. Hence, BIPA has, together with the ministry in 2018, decided that we are going to embark on a process where we reform and review the laws to be able to better streamline the conduct of businesses in Namibia. The International Roundtable Consultative Forum is therefore a week-long forum that brings together the international consultants that is working on this project, together with local stakeholders, expert stakeholders from various industries, to set the foundation for the crafting of a new corporate law. And that's basically what we are doing for this week, Nina.
In 2019, the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, together with BIPA, drafted a policy on key reforms. Perhaps briefly share with us what this policy entails and how does this policy speak to the fourth industrial revolution in the business sector?
So I think I just touched on it. The policy document is basically a document that speaks about the reason for law reform in the country. Specifically on the reform of the corporate law. So as I noted that we, together with the ministry and government as a whole, realized that the Companies Act and Close Corporations Act impacts so many other laws. This could be based on investment, insolvency, etc., etc. And because the laws were non-responsive, we realized that in order for us to reach specific economic goals, investment goals, we needed to make the ease of doing business easier. Just to give you an idea, Nina, that Namibia was part of 190 economies that were ranked on the World Bank's ease of doing business, although by now, by last year, the ranking was halted or suspended. And our last ranking of 2020 ranked us at 104 out of 190 economies in terms of how easy is it to do business in the country. So this was really not a good ranking on these international indices. We are also ranked on other international indices, such as the Global Competitiveness Index, the Global Innovation Index, amongst others. So we needed to say, where do we want to be as a country? How competitive do we want to be? How easy do we want business to flow in the country? At what level of enhancement do we want to enhance confidence of foreign as well as domestic investors into the country? And based on that, the policy document was drawn up to say that, okay, from this point onwards, BIPA can then start with the reforms of corporate law in the country. How this is tied to probably the fourth industrial revolution is that BIPA is on a journey not only for legislative reform, but also on a digital transformation journey. And what this will allow us is to craft the law in such a way that would make it easier for it would basically minimize the digital divide. It would allow people to now start filing online. As we know, the current law is restrictive in terms of how applications and amendments and so forth can be filed. I mean, the old law still talks about postage. We are in an era now where we use emails, where we use online applications. We are thinking of, in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, of uh, uh, um, artificial intelligence. So we want to make sure that the law speaks to systems that would be able to cater for faster online registration and amendments and lodgements. Further to that, also as far as it relates to the fourth industrial revolution, we are talking about big data mining, being able to mine data from our registers, allowing the registrar to be able to mine this data and create meaningful data that policymakers can use to make key decisions for the country in as far as it relates to investment, unemployment or employment creation, economic development and growth.
Let's talk briefly about, some of the challenges that have been hindering Namibia's performance on the continent in terms of business ranking, and how it can, overcome this.
I think generally it's what we are currently doing is to say that our laws, our legal framework was non-responsive. It has not been modernized since independence. Just to give you an idea, Nina, the current Companies Act is a 2004 act, which means that this act came into force in just slightly after 2004. But the act before that was a 1973 act. It was a Companies Act, South African Companies Act. So from independence, Namibia relied on a 1973 act up until the time for company registration of 2004 when that act was promulgated. But we also saw that there wasn't much difference between the 1973 act and the 2004 act. And before the 1973 act, we had a 1926 act. So it was quite old, and it is important to note that if we don't create a robust legal framework for our country to be able to effectively and efficiently manage our economy, to attract foreign investment, to make business easier, to give open access to people to do business, and of course also to keep to account the directors and members and shareholders that actually conduct business, we will continue to perform low on these international indices. So what we are saying is that with the review and the reform of corporate law in the country, and of course all other laws, we will make doing business easier, which will give us a chance to improve our ranking on international indices.
Talk to us about the role that international experts and stakeholders can then play in corporate law in promoting business and economic growth.
So I'll speak, thank you, Nina. I'll speak specifically to the international and local experts that are part of this roundtable. And I want to give assurance to the Namibian public that we have a very experienced team and a very excited team, both from the international stakeholders as well as the local experts. The international experts that we have is led by a professor of law from South Africa. He's an associate professor in law at the University of Witwatersrand. And he has been instrumental in the reform of, for instance, the 2008 South African Companies Act. He was the deputy chair on the Specialized Committee on Company Law. And together with him, there are experts from the UK, from the United States, with various expertise. But we are cognizant of the fact that although we are using these international experts to guide us in terms of the way forward and where the globe is trending in as far as it relates to corporate law, we also need local experts. And this is why the roundtable has been started today, to be able to bring together the international as well as the local experts, to be able to craft a law. To further give you an indication of where we're going from here, this is really to set a foundation of starting to craft the law. After this, we are still going to have countrywide stakeholder engagements with various other experts and interested individuals that would be able to have an input in the crafting of this law. We want to make sure that it is as inclusive as possible, and that's why we are going to ensure that we consult as widely as possible.
Just as we round off our discussion, Ockert, perhaps you can talk to us about what BIPA and its stakeholders hope to achieve, from this consultative forum.
Ultimately, not only from the forum, but I think from the reform process, Nina, is that we want to ensure that we craft a law that is modernized, that is responsive to our current needs, and that is simplified. For those that have registered a business, especially companies, would know that it is administratively so cumbersome because of the current law. So many documents to file, so many timelines to meet, etc., etc. But what we want to do from what we want to achieve is that we are not only going to copy from one specific country and so forth, but that we are holistically looking at where the world is going in as far as it relates to the reform on corporate law. There are some significant changes that we would like to, for instance, see, and this relates to in the introduction of business rescue in our laws. Currently, we only have judicial management, and we know that that has not particularly been very successful in saving businesses in the country. We also want to look at the aspect of beneficial ownership, and as far as it relates to the conduct of businesses in the areas of anti-money laundering, counter terrorism financing, counter proliferation financing. We are looking at issues of codification of directives for fiduciary duties, for instance. That is a key thing. We are looking at, for instance, the type of vehicles or companies that we may establish. I mean, currently Namibia is I believe, one of the only countries that still has a close cooperation in as part of its law. And we're looking at, do we form a new close company, those that are a widely held company versus a closely held company? We are also looking at the introduction of state-owned enterprises into the Companies Act, which there is currently a gap. We are looking at incorporating professional partnerships as a type of a legal entity. So these are some of the reforms that we are considering in crafting this, and we hope that at the end of this consultative forum, we would have a clear roadmap as to where our consultants can start from in terms of drafting that and taking it to the people.
Ockert Jansen, thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you for joining us here on the Daily Roundup.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break. The Daily Roundup continues. Stay tuned.